I quite like this man. He's called Shinji Mikami and he's directed a lot of games that you most likely have played. Now, if you're like, I bet I haven't, I can tell you that you have. You most definitely have. He's pretty well known within the industry for, you know, being the guy behind the huge horror game series that everyone knows and loves, The Evil Within, and he's just recently opened up a new studio and is working on whatever the fuck this is. Now, another fellow within the industry that I really like is Suda51, who is more known for making the best 7 out of 10 games you have ever played. And if you've played them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The guy really isn't afraid to just put all of his creative ideas on the table and somehow make them work, crafting bangers like No More Heroes, Lollipop Chainsaw, and Killer 7, which I haven't actually played yet, and funnily enough, Shinji Mikami played a part in that game's creation. I mean, it's a cult classic for a reason. I really need to play it. These two minds being put together to create a game is like a dream come true. But yeah, I haven't played it, so instead I wanted to talk about a different game they both worked on together, Shadows of the Damned. Oh, and this guy also directed it too, and he's known for... Okay, this game's development was a fucking shit show, but yeah, I'll get to that. From an outsider's perspective, Shadows of the Damned just looks like a Resident Evil 4 styled action horror game, with the weird ass elements and design choices you would see from a Suda51 game, and yeah, that's exactly what this game is.
Just warn me if I have to fuck a horse to unlock a door, huh?
And it's why I love it despite its many flaws and the fact it was set up to fail due to a lot of meddling from EA, who are the unfortunate publishers of this game. It has such an intriguing, turbulent story for what could have been such a smash hit, or at least a cult classic. See, Shadows of the Damned was originally supposed to be a completely different game called Kuriyami, which had way more of a focus on the horror element, which was unique for Suda at the time. It was a game where you were stranded in this weird old Eastern European town and its accompanying castle, with the only thing having at your disposal being a torch to light the way. And I can imagine this torch might have had way more mechanics centered around it because the game was going to have a focus on advanced lighting and graphics techniques, but obviously we never got to see this version in practice, with the only things remaining being concept art and a manga. And also Shinji Mikami would shamelessly steal this later for the Evil Within's DLCs, which would have a huge focus on light from a torch alongside having a difficulty literally called Kuriyami. You ain't slick, bro. You ain't slick. Luckily, these concepts for Kuriyami weren't put to waste, with some of them clearly being used for Shadows of the Damned. I mean, you literally start in that Eastern European town with a focus on getting to a big castle at the end, and gameplay wise there is still a heavy focus on light, with darkness being a huge game mechanic, having it slowly drain your health if you remain in it for too long, even with enemies being weak to light. Now, one of the biggest factors as to why this original concept for Kuriyami fell through is because EA wanted to westernize things for Americans, which, you know, perfect thing to do when you hire on 2 Japanese directors. Nice one. And a big thing they wanted to have in Kuriyami was giving the main character a gun, which kinda went against the original concept Suda had in mind completely, but EA probably thought no one in the West would buy it if there weren't guns. In fact, a lot of things changed throughout its development, with Suda himself referring to these pitching meetings as being like court interrogations. Poor guy. In fact, the whole westernizing it shit is the reason why the new guy, Massimo Guarini, was put onto directing it as well, as he clearly had a lot of experience with western games. There were so many revisions, so many different versions, where it got to a point where it genuinely felt like EA straight up just gave up with the game and just forced it out with barely any marketing, with the game selling around a whopping 24,000 copies at launch in the West. It was a flop, and was left to rot for over a decade. That was until Suda51's company Grasshopper managed to get the rights back to Shadows of the Damned and even remastered it, making it very easy to access on modern hardware. And like I've said, I do really like this game. I even 100%ed it, so I kinda just wanted to shine a light on it on my channel to hopefully maybe get some of you to check it out. Especially now, considering EA will see absolutely none of that money.
Alright, let's start this road movie with some road.
Shadows Shadows of the Damned stars a fella named Garcia Hotspur, a demon hunter covered in cool ass tattoos, which luckily is an outfit in this remaster. You can play as him completely topless, and I do recommend playing through it with this on so you can appreciate his inked up back the whole time. He lives with his wife Paula. Oh, okay, she's not actually dead here. Instead, Garcia is being fucked with by the Lord of the Underworld, Fleming, who is voiced by the guy who was Leon in OG RE4. Fun little fact there. He wants revenge for the fact he's been going around killing all of his demon friends, so he kidnaps Paula and Garcia goes after him into hell itself to save her. It's basically just the plot of Super Mario, but with an insane amount of sexual tension and edge. He's accompanied by a floating skull companion named Johnson, who is able to turn into a gun called the Boner. The name Johnson makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Now I'm just gonna talk about it now. Sex is a big theme in this game, to a point where there's a section where Johnson rigs a hotline to make himself harder and longer, with Garcia referring to the version of the gun as the Big Boner. And in this section you have to stand your ground, shooting giant demons with the gun aimed down at your crotch, and in between these sections you walk along giant versions of Paula with her tits hanging out. I had to censor these sections entirely during my stream for obvious reasons. I did it in a very cool way with my stupid little guy on the screen. Follow me on Twitch, by the way. I've started using that way more. The sexual themes do make sense because sex is a sin. I've never had it before and you've never had it too, which is why we're going to heaven. So it makes sense why sex is very prominent in the underworld, because, you know, you shouldn't be doing it. It's against our Lord and Savior. On the topic of the underworld, I love the interpretation of it in Shadows of the Damned. Like I said earlier, it's very clear that the original concept of Kuriyami being set in an Eastern European village was reused in this game, with a lot of the early game sections taking place in this cold, dingy, cobblestone, Victorian-esque street, which is a complete contrast to traditional interpretations of hell, which are usually just portrayed as the UK during a heatwave. I fucking hate this country. The visual style definitely enhances the cold feel of these streets, with the high contrast on the shadows really enhancing the dark, gloomy feel. As a whole, I just love how this game looks. I really miss when consoles had a lot of limitations, forcing developers to focus on a unique art style that ages well, rather than having a focus on high fidelity and hyper-realism, making almost every big budget AAA game just blend together visually. So playing this felt like a huge breath of fresh air. It looked amazing, although most people would probably argue that it just looks deep fried due to the boosted saturation and contrast, but to me, it is art. That was pretentious as shit, I'm so sorry. The visuals definitely enhance the horror aspect of Shadows of the Damned 2. Now, whilst the game isn't inherently a survival horror game with more of a focus on action more akin to Resident Evil 4 than The Evil Within, in terms of gameplay at least, I would argue it's more focused on the Evil Within aspect when it comes to the horror department visually, because some areas in this game are just grim. Like, it has some truly disturbing visuals that made my skin crawl in a good way, because I love this shit. I also like how Garcia just never really acknowledges any of the creepy shit we see whilst playing as him, staying completely silent, which makes you feel more isolated seeing these unimaginable horrors, even when it's stuff the developers intentionally put in to freak you out when you least expect it. Like these severed heads rolling down a hill you just went down to go off the beaten path slightly. Why is this in the game? I don't know, but it's stuck with me, it freaks me out, it haunts my dreams. And Garcia he says nothing during any of it. None of this would hit the same if we were playing as, say, Sebastian from The Evil Within 2, who had to go, "What the?" to every single out of the ordinary thing he saw. Honestly, I could talk about the whole silent protagonist enhancing horror shit for ages, but that's what the second channel's for, so let's move on. All of the eeriness of the underworld in Shadows is enhanced by the soundtrack, and that's because it's being composed by the Silent Hill legend himself, Akira Yamaoka. Akira Yamaoka. Yeah, EA really did have like a potential revolutionary hit on their hands, but they just had to fucking micromanage, didn't they? Now, if you didn't already know, Akira is the king of atmospheric soundtracks that just make you feel constantly on edge. I mean, listen to Black Fairy from Silent Hill 2. The best way I can describe this song is it feels like you just had a dream about being at work, just to wake up to your alarm and realizing you have a whole day of work ahead of you. If you're employed, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's music that embodies dread and hopelessness, which he definitely manages to nail in Shadows of the Damned for the slower, horror-focused moments. Now, Akira is also known for more uplifting tracks that kind of hype you up too. For example, Theme of Laura from Silent Hill 2 again. But man, he did not hold back for the soundtrack in Shadows. I love a lot of these tracks. I even love the weirder, slower paced ones that are like a nice in-between of the two. My personal favourite being the loading screen tracks. These are great, and honestly, I'm probably going to start using these a lot more in my videos. They work very well as like background music. Now, where Shadows of the Damned is kind of lacking is in terms of the gameplay. Well, the combat specifically. It wears its Resident Evil 4 inspirations on its sleeve, or well, it just blatantly does exactly what Resident Evil 4 does, even down to the laser sight on all of the weapons, which, in my opinion, is a good thing, because the laser sight will always beat the ugly-ass crosshair UI that you find in most games nowadays. Shit's just evolved since then, and I just don't understand why. Bring back the red dot sight. But yeah, Garcia is basically just Leon Kennedy, but Mexican, and can actually move whilst aiming, so I guess he's actually a superior character to Leon. I mean, the Resident Evil 4 elements make a lot of sense, considering Shinji Mikami's name is attached to the game, and yeah, he's the guy behind Resident Evil 4. If you didn't already know, you fucking know. I don't even know what I'm saying. I mean, there's even a merchant who shows up in random places in this game and comments on different things happening that you've just experienced. But you guys will not guess the type of voice this demon has. It catches me off guard every time he speaks.
What the shit is that?
Let's take a closer look.
Well, howdy-ho! Name's Christopher. Now, don't y'all be afraid, I ain't gonna bite. Trust me. You see, I'm what you call a mixture of beast and human. Oh, best of both worlds.
By the way, this is also the same guy who voices Liquid Snake in Metal Gear Solid 1. They really had a lot of talent on this game. Nice job again, EA. You know, you really fucked this one up. And I haven't even mentioned yet that Garcia himself is voiced by Steve Bloom, who is another iconic voice actor. You already know who he is. I mean, he's in everything. We don't talk about Johnson's voice actor though. We don't talk about him. Despite the fact Garcia can actually move whilst aiming, unlike Leon, he is unfortunately lacking in the weapon department, only holding on to 3 weapons. The pistol, the SMG, and of course, the shotgun. Can't have a horror action game without a shotgun. At first, these weapons do seem a bit basic, but the further in you get, you acquire blue gems that Garcia plugs into Johnson, allowing him to turn into unique expanded versions of these weapons. Like for example, turning the tastefully named pistol, the Boner, into the Hot Boner. It lets you charge up sticky bombs you can shoot onto enemies and walls. It's actually really overpowered.
Fill those cracks with your explosive hot boner.
The SMG gets a lock-on mode, which is busted as hell, and the shotgun gets this charge attack, which turns the ammo, which are skulls, into this big skull, which basically acts as a huge bomb, and it's used very creatively in small sections later in the game, like this bowling alley with the demons being the pins, and this pachinko machine. I really do wish there were more things like this in the game. They were a lot of fun, but obviously, we all know what happened at this point. My biggest problem with Shadows is the fact that obviously there were a lot of really cool ideas here that ultimately just feel somewhat surface level. Like the game has a lot of really cool and interesting concepts that just clearly weren't given enough time to be fully fleshed out and hit their full potential, which is unfortunate. It's still fun though. You know, I can't fault it for that. Now, there is one mechanic that I do think is fully realized in Shadows, and it's one that makes it stand out quite a bit. That mechanic is the darkness, which loops back to the whole Kuriyami concept. So the darkness in the underworld is something mortal beings cannot stand in for too long, with demons thriving in it. The only way to disperse this darkness is by shooting a goat's head with an alternative fire mode on all 3 of the guns called the light shot, which is what the demons are also weak to. What? Enemies being weak to a thing that creates a light source? What? I've never seen that before. It's another thing Shinji Mikami would shamelessly steal from Suda. Whenever you're engulfed by this darkness, it feels like a mad dash to find the goat head as soon as you can, because the game wastes no time with draining your health. It's actually quite punishing. What I like is the fact there are certain sections where the darkness is segmented off in certain areas with no goat head in sight, or if there are ones, you can only use them to create small pockets to regain your health whilst you try and solve a puzzle or deal with enemies within the darkness. It's just a really fun mechanic that creates a lot of tension. I especially love that certain boss fights take full advantage of this mechanic, like how one of the first bosses literally steals one of the goat heads and you need to track him down in a weird meat market to light shot the goat so you don't have your flesh dissolved from your body in the darkness. I think that's what happens. Like I said earlier, enemies thrive in the darkness, becoming invincible after even touching it, and you can only get rid of this by using the light shot. What I like though is that even outside of the darkness, the enemies like to lurk in the shadows around the areas you trudge through, fleeing when you create a light source. There are even some sections that recreate that one mission from Little Big Planet where you follow a light source attached to a dog through certain areas. However, instead of a dog, it's a little fish called a sushi lamp, which is my favorite critter from this game. I love these things, and whenever I see one, I am filled with an immense amount of joy. The music that accompanies them is very silly too. Despite the silliness of this creature, the segments we find them in are some of the most arse-clenching, because obviously it's our only light source in pitch black areas, where we're usually ambushed by multiple enemies from every corner, with the only thing we're able to see of them being their glowing eyes. Well, yeah, about that. Since the demons hate the light, they actually use their brain to counter this and start to wear masks later in the game, meaning in some of these sections, you can't even see them coming until it is too late. Every time without fail, I have always died in that one library section with the sushi lamp. I don't know what it is. It's so many enemies, and I never see them coming. So yeah, Shadows of the Damned is a cool game that I really like, and I think you should check it out if you have the time. It gets the Proxidus seal of approval, and even though its development was a complete shit show, I still hold it in high regards in terms of the game Suda51 has created. It's not going to be the best game you'll ever play, but at least you'll have a good time.
Cover! Crowded out there! Wait, let me guess. I'm going to open this door again and all the demons will be gone, right?
I hope you all enjoyed this little video on Shadows of the Damned. It's a game that I think more people should check out, and I really hope that this has convinced you to give it a try. You may have noticed this is way shorter than my Devil May Cry retrospective type videos, but that's because I want to start uploading like some smaller videos in between them, because they do take a while. The Devil May Cry 3 video was 1 hour and 20 minutes, man. Like, you gotta give me time to make them, and in between I want to talk about some smaller games that I might not have as much to say about, but I still want to share with you guys. If you liked what you watched, please leave a like, maybe leave a comment for the algorithm, and subscribe if you enjoyed seeing this and you want to see more videos like this in the future. You know, I plan on making a lot more. Oh, and also follow me on Twitch. I have a Discord server as well, and check out my second channel where I post way more frequently, more laid-back content, not like scripted like this with a bunch of editing. I do more, well, just unscripted rambles on that channel, and people seem to like them. So if you like hearing what I have to say, check out the second channel. I want to give a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys are the absolute best. Thank you so much for supporting me. And yeah, I'll see you all in the next video. Gonna start working on the Devil May Cry 4 videos soon, so look out for that.